Good Memorial Day to you. Tim Shepard interviewed Sebastian Junger about freedom and said some things that seemed relevant to today, Memorial Day. As we remember people who have died for a cause greater than themselves. And one of the things that Sebastian Junger, said about freedom is that freedom is freedom from oppression, but it's not freedom from obligation. And that if we're to live as a community of people, we're obligated to each other. Obligated to each other as a society and obligated to each other in our relationships in all kinds of different ways. I'll put a link to the podcast. For Memorial Day, I'd like to read a short recounting that Scott Delgarno wrote. It appeared in the Christian Century. It's about a 3-minute and 45-second read. Jane said it would be a private interment at the National Cemetery. I knew she had no children, so I wondered if it might just be the two of us. But 5 of her late husband's caregivers showed up. I told Jeff's story as best I could, but the caregivers were the main event. Jane and Jeff slept in adjoining twin beds, said one of the young women. Jane would get up first. She'd start the coffee. Then she'd wake Jeff with a dozen kisses. They'd really go at it. Jane would go fetch the paper, then she'd come back for seconds. At the end of the proceedings, the cemetery director blew in, charging through the chapel door, clearing his throat in case we missed his big entrance. He took the tightly folded triangle of a flag and placed it in the widow's hands. Then, with way more emotion than was warranted from a complete stranger, he told Jane how this flag was presented with the thanks of a grateful nation. About the time he brought up the president, she interrupted him to say, Where are his ashes? We'll get to that, he said. And then he launched back into his speech, pretty much from the beginning, so as not to miss a word. Jane let him finish this time, and then spoke again. Where are his ashes? I want to see his ashes into the ground. The director told her that just wasn't done anymore. With 17,000 veterans dying each day, there wasn't time to give them all a truly proper burial. It's important to Jane to put her husband's ashes into the ground herself, I said. I'll have to make a call, he said. Less than 3 minutes later, an army green golf cart pickup carrying a load of fresh topsoil pulled up the chapel drive. We took our time ambling over to the gravesite. The groundskeeper, wearing a smart green jumpsuit, dug the hole neatly, a square foot, about 3 feet deep. The director asked Jane if she'd like to kneel. Jane can't kneel, I said. As if by prior agreement, we formed a burial team. One of the caregivers got behind Jane, holding her around the middle. Another, similarly, held onto the first. I knelt in front of Jane, putting a hand under the box. The director grabbed the handle, and Jane grabbed the other. We all went down together, with the rear caregiver leaning way back to balance us all. Jane, always very slim, doubled over completely. She was able to get Jeff's ashes maybe 6 inches into that hole, but that was the absolute limit. So we all just hung there in the grave, but not at the bottom. I was supporting Jeff's mortal remains from below. The 2 caregivers were leaning back at about 30 to 45 degrees. We must have looked something like a Marx Brothers impression of the flag raising on Iwo Jima. All of us who loved Jane knew what had to be done. But if we had to hang there until dawn, holding her and Jeff's ashes in a suspended position, we'd have gone and done that rather than speak up. It was the director who, bless him, broke the spell. Ma'am, he said, you're just going to have to let go. In about 10 seconds, Jane found whatever grace was necessary to do that. No wail, no tears, Just a world of respect for 60 years lived with a lovely man, someone who was her whole life. After ashes to ashes and dust to dust, the man in the jumpsuit filled in the hole and placed the square swatch of turf on it. Just so. Blessings on your day. May you find God in these times of COVID. It's Memorial Day, May the 31st, 2021.